All right, let me race through this thing. See if I can spot any immediate typos or confusing words. And then if you want to come in, feel free. I'll get a cup of coffee, and long about 45 minutes, if we're still hanging out here, or even before, we'll play Wes Camp's video on the rich man and Lazarus. How exciting! Because Wes Camp has a really great video on the rich man and Lazarus. And we'll take a glorious look at it. And I think Gabe is going to stop by and help me with the production. He'll be playing the video for us, and we'll stop and make comments. But here I wanted to compliment the whole proper teaching of the rich man and Lazarus with some notes. Okay, that's what's going on here. Welcome to the Little Old Ace Theological Club. We have been rather quiet, except for the birds and the keystrokes on the typing machine. And let's see what we got. What about the rich man and Lazarus? Breaking news, it's a parable. Good morning, dear one. The serious Bible student might be interested in the facts revealed concerning the story Jesus told of the rich man and Lazarus. Most folks, i.e. Christians, are not serious Bible students. They go to church. They let the pastor read one verse and listen to him prattle on for an hour, then think they know what the Bible teaches, quote unquote. I think we can say that on the whole, Christianity uses the story of the rich man and Lazarus to scare the crap out of people and continually promote that false teaching of endless conscious torment in hell. Here are some facts regarding the topic at hand. Hang on a second. Deborah says, Ray, have you ever listened to L. Ray Smith's video, 23 Minutes in Hell? I laughed so hard I thought I was about to die. Ray showed it was a fake. What a fake bill it was. Okay. I have not. Can you put the link to that, Deborah? Okay, here are some facts regarding the topic at hand. Number one, the rich man and Lazarus was not just a parable, but it's one part of a 5-part parable. How do we know? Because Luke 15, verse 3 says, Jesus opened his mouth and spake unto them this parable. This parable. This parable. Get it? This parable. Well, if we keep on reading, this parable goes on and on about the lost sheep, the lost coin, the prodigal son, the shrewd steward, and finally the rich man and Lazarus. And please note, this parable goes on and on for 2 chapters. Luke 15 and 16 is all one long parable. Now you might ask, to whom was Jesus speaking? Well, we find the answer in Luke 15, verses 1 and 2, and also 16:3. He was speaking to 5 groups of people: tax collectors, sinners, Pharisees, scribes, and his own disciples. What was the occasion of this old parable? Well, the Pharisees and scribes were kind of pissed that Jesus was enjoying the company of sinners. See chapter 15, verse 2. You see, the scribes and the Pharisees were big muckety-mucks in their day, and they were right. And if they were right in their religious understanding of things, they were going to have a special place in the kingdom of the Messiah when the Messiah shows up. Little did they know their Messiah was standing right in front of their eyes, not what they expected at all. The scribes and the Pharisees were not too friendly with regular old sinners. Something to do with self-righteousness and pride-filled power, if you know what I mean. So they were investing in the future by making sure they had a seat at the table and no one else did when the kingdom era showed up. You get me? They didn't expect this fellow Jesus to be the Messiah. He was nothing special to them. He was a distraction, to say the least. They didn't expect that. He was a distraction, to say the least. They wanted to be the center of attention, and Jesus was getting too much attention. Keep in mind, they knew the kingdom, quote unquote, was coming, and they knew, and Jesus knew the kingdom was coming, and they thought they'd have a lofty spot in the kingdom, but Jesus used this 5-part parable to show them their days as muckety-mucks was numbered. Keep in mind, after Jesus' resurrection, the disciples asked Jesus, "Will you now restore the kingdom to Israel?" You see, Israel getting their promised kingdom is a thing. It's a thing. But the timing of the matter is sketchy. Even Jesus doesn't know the time it's going to happen, and said as much to the disciples when they asked him that question. Jesus said, "It's not for you to know the times, not even I know, only the Father knows the times." More specifically, Acts chapter 1, verse 7, he said unto them, "Not yours is it to know times or eras which the Father placed in his own jurisdiction." By all appearances, Jesus was supposed to be the king of the kingdom, and he was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and they were supposed to accept him as the Messiah and king. But something went terribly wrong. He ended up on a pole instead, dead. Everything went wrong. Then a cosmic shift in the axis of the universe happened, and God raised him from the dead. Now what? The disciples are confused. The Jews are confused. We might even say that Jesus is confused, as he too admits he does not know the times. We don't get a hint of what's going on with Israel until their promised kingdom, and their promised kingdom until Hebrews chapter 3, verse 3, which says, "By faith we are apprehending the eons to adjust to a declaration of God, so that what is being observed has not come out of what is appearing." The book of Hebrews was written to the Jews to explain to them what the hell is going on and why they don't have their promised and expected kingdom yet. Yes, God does have an Aeonian plan and purpose. See Ephesians 3:11. But who knew? Gotta fix that typo there. Who knew? Crap, that's not right. Who knew that the eons would have to be adjusted to a declaration of God? The adjustment of the eons is a thing. See Hebrews 11:3. Jesus came as as Israel's promised Messiah, but rejected. So after the resurrection and a little housekeeping with the disciples, Jesus ascends to be seated with the Father and sends the Spirit on the day of Pentecost to see if Israel is game to receive their Messiah, and the rejection gets worse. finally, the rejection or acceptance of Messiah gets to the pins and needles stage when Stephen is recounting the whole story to them. In Acts chapter 7 and 8, just before they killed Stephen, Jesus was standing, not seated, at the right hand of God, ready to return as the Messiah? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Well, Jesus got his answer. Then they pelted, when they pelted Stephen, that's it. When they pelted Stephen with some pretty seriously big rocks. God had to adjust his Eonian purpose. And thus, we come to Paul and the administration of pure grace. What an adjustment. Thanks be to God that he hardened Israel's knuckle-headed heart. Thank God, the something new, something not seen before or known. Okay, I'll be right back. Oh, feel free to come on in, but I gotta make some coffee and I'll be right back. All right, I'm almost back. Are you scared? Are you running? All right, where was I? God had to adjust his Eonian purpose, and thus we come to Paul and the administration of pure grace. What an adjustment. Thanks be to God that he hardened Israel's knuckle-headed heart. Thank God thank God, the something new, the something not seen before or known among the prophets of old happened. There we go. Grace. See Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. The eons have been adjusted. The ecclesia, which is his body, was created and introduced, and Paul was the tool to bring us the news. So Jesus' 5-part parable, spoken primarily to the Pharisees and scribes, goes like this. The lost sheep, the lost coins, the prodigal son, the shrewd steward, and finally the rich man and Lazarus. It goes like this. Number 1, I will not lose one sheep. Number 2, I will not lose one coin. Number 3, even the worst prodigal will be so welcome when they come home. And number 4, if you were smart, you'd prepare to lose your high and mighty positions as chiefs and scribes as you're about to be fired. And number 5, you think you're rich in the knowledge of the law and the prophets, but you're about to learn a lesson you'll never forget. These lost sheep, lost coins, and prodigal sons are about to see some blessings you rich dudes, rich in self-righteousness, know nothing about. Let me move that up here. Not only is the kingdom coming and you're to be left out, but the eons are to be adjusted, and the scum of the earth, those heathen Gentiles, are going to be brought in just to piss you off. Okay, let's give a reference there. Romans what? 9, 10, and 11. That'll do. So you Pharisees like apples? How do you like them apples? So on the whole, I'd say it's plumb wrong. On the whole, I'd say it's plumb wrong for the Pharisees of our day, the evangelical religious knuckleheads, to use the rich man and Lazarus story to insist that they are going to heaven and we scum of the earth are going to hell. Regarding the adjusting of the eons, it looks like this. Matthew through Acts, and then Paul's big fat letters, and then Hebrews through Revelation. Paul's letters are so out of place. From Matthew through Revelation, we have a message to, for, about, and concerning Israel. Paul's evangel of our salvation is the grand adjustment of the eons. God put Israel on pause, time out. God is now gracious with all the nations and is offering to, let's see, that's not right. And is offering. Oh, no, that should be no, I guess. God is being gracious with all the nations and is offering no special privilege to Israel yet. At the moment. There we go. God is being gracious with all nations and is offering no special privilege to Israel at the moment, and will not until Messiah returns and the ecclesia, which is his body, is removed. Oh my. All right, that's it. What do you got, boys? Good
Good morning.
morning to you.
Morning, kids.
All right, now I hear you better.
Yes.
GG, Christ, and Plastic Jesus. Lord have mercy, what a motley crew you guys are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I think JG split. I think I heard the ice cream man.
That's a good reason. I hear a lighter going off that reminds me to smoke. You know,
I'm
sometimes
sorry.
I need to be reminded to smoke because I forget about it. Well, what'd you think of their Pumpkin Christ? How'd you like my little essay?
8.9.
Mm-hmm.
It was stellar.
Have you ever heard of the adjustment of the eons?
Vaguely.
The phrase shows up in Hebrews chapter 3, verse 1. And guess what? All of the dudes out there who insist that that the aeons can be eternal or world or all these other words, you know, they're not consistent with it at all. They totally mess up this verse. Chapter 11, verse 3. So that it would just go right over their heads that there is an adjustment of the eons by the declaration of God. They wouldn't know anything about it because most translations say, by faith we understand God created the worlds. But it's not created and it's not worlds. It's adjust and it's eons.
Oh.
See?
Well.
Created the worlds, that's kind of like that's a different concept. Adjusting the eons, I mean, words mean things, you know, and if God's word is supposedly important, why can't we be consistent with our translations and get down and jiggy with what he says? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when it says that he's filling a void, is it stating that there is already an object there to create upon, or is it stated anywhere in the Bible that the world itself has to be created first?
Are you referring to Genesis?
I'm just going along with what you're stating here, pretty much. Just breaking it down a little bit, I guess. Creation, you said that he's not the creator of the world or the worlds, right? Or we're talking about planetary objects then, or that the form itself is just a void lump of clay, or are you talking there's nothing there completely that has to be created before you can even mold the clay, is what I'm getting at.
All right. So in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3, all the popular translations, the wrong ones, the wrong popular ones, it says, by faith we understand that the worlds were created by the word of God. But the word worlds is not there. It's actually the word eons. The word created is not there. It's actually the word adjust. So the popular translations send us down the wrong thought trail. It's easy and cheesy to say that God created the worlds. Yeah, that's no big deal. But that's not even what it says in Hebrews 11:3.
That seems to lead my mind towards more of a pantheistic view of the world rather than a sole creator that created everything in the heavens as a god. We're just manipulating forces to come to where we are now, which is pretty much what the universe has done so far. So there's no God implemented in that
Plastic,
or needed in that.
The word world is not even in Hebrews 11:3.
World, universe, your own self, your reflection, whatever you want to call it.
It's not there. The word world in the Greek of the New Testament is cosmos. The word cosmos is not in Hebrews 11:3 at all. What we are looking at is the word aeon, which is a time word. Aeon and cosmos are two different words, and the word cosmos is not found in Hebrews 11:3. And so, we have an entirely different thing going on in Hebrews 11:3. Nobody knows about it because all of the popular translations, King James and NIV and New American Standard, they all screw it up. So we can't even think what the original text said because the screwy translations lead us down the wrong thought path. The word world is not there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The more you dig into the Bible, the more you unlock and see all the different meanings of the words itself, the less you see of a God and the more you see of just what is in the universe, excluding almost out the idea of a creator God. Yeah.
I followed about half of that. Try it again.
When you start to break the Bible down, you start to go into meaning of different words and where they come from. You'll find that it is more pantheistic in nature rather than deistic. It just tends to break down to what it is, leaving out the need for a God.
Well, I believe that I have broken it down more than you have. I've been at it a long time.
That's totally subjective.
I've been a serious student of the scriptures, and I don't believe that, it has led me down a pantheistic road.
Slowly but surely it can.
You're saying it can, but it hasn't done it with me. So that's a subjective opinion.
Right. Yeah. It's just and it goes both ways. You'll say you just don't understand, and I'll say, well, you just don't understand. So we're at a crossroads.
It hasn't happened with me. I'm not a pantheist. So, but the day is young. It's only 45 minutes past the hour.
You never know.
So check it out. Here's the concordant literal translation of Hebrews 11:3. By faith, we are apprehending the eons to adjust to a declaration of God, so that what is being observed has not come out of what is appearing. Okay.
Can I get an interpretation?
Sure. So the book of Hebrews was written, obviously, to the Jews, right? We can tell that from the title. And so the Jews were expecting Jesus to be the Messiah. And they were, since he was crucified and ascended into heaven, they still were expecting him to come back rather quickly. So what was being observed is not what is appearing. Things are all screwed up. However, here in verse 3, the writer assures us that the eons have been adjusted. So the timeline is not what they thought it was going to be. And the reason this eons had to be adjusted is because God is being gracious to the nations now through the evangel of our salvation revealed by Paul. So the book of Hebrews, on the whole, was written to Israel to reassure them, cool your heels, you're going to get your Messiah. It just is not going to happen as fast or in the timeline that you thought it was going to happen, but it is going to happen. So the whole book of Hebrews is all about Jewish things, and it's concerning Jewish prophecy and Jewish covenants and the Jewish fulfillments and the oracles. They get them. They were chosen. And something has gone wrong. They didn't understand what's gone wrong. And that is that the eons have been adjusted by a declaration of God.
What if I'm a Jew?
And what if I'm wearing snakeskin boots?
Are you?
Wow, fancy.
What if there's a snake in your boots?
Yeah.
Oh wait, that's just a lawyer's business card in my wallet.
Hey, Tommy.
Hey, brother, did you get us another strike?
Yeah.
Damn, for last night's sacred hangout?
No, I think it was Mark Passio talking about his experience with the V at the beginning of yesterday, the day before.
Yep, they'll get you. They got me one.
Ridiculous. You got a strike?
I have 2 strikes, just because of that and that whole talk. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got 2 now. So, Tommy, just subscribe to that alternative channel in the.
It is done, my lord. It is done.
Cool. I'll just stream from there.
That's a clever name, Jay. Censorship exists.
Sure does.
At first, I thought it was a parody account.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, look, JG has a fan.
Not there yet.
Hey. Was that a YouTube video that you showed?
Yeah, the guy with the beard the guy with the beard that you like so much.
Yeah, him.
Talking about atheists the other day. In the beginning, he talked about the V in his personal experience a little bit, and I noticed that, and then I looked around and noticed he had that video up for over a year, and someone else had it up. So I was like, I figured if it's been up for a year, it's not going to be a problem. But I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And this makes me think too that, you know, people's old videos talking about these subjects are going to get strikes when the algorithm catches up. So it's pretty ridiculous what's happening.
It may be that a human being incited the algorithm.
Yeah, that does happen, yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's a possibility too. So I can't really know.
Do you have any annoyed fans?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not inciting paranoia. I'm just contemplating.
Sometimes I've gotten appeals granted. I think sometimes you can get an appeal granted if you claim you're talking about a heavy subject as comedy satire. That's how like people like Joy Camp and Awaken with JP get away with their content.
I see.
It's labeled as comedy satire, so they can talk about certain things and get away with it. So it might be worth a try.
I'm laughing already.
Yeah, well, it might be worth a try the next time you get a strike to claim that it's comedy satire. It might work for you.
Why do you think I joke about sexual issues? Because I can get away with it under the banner of comedy.
Yeah.
So I confess anyway. Oh.
Sounds like a Bee Gees song. I started a joke, which started the whole world crying.
Oh.
Is that the Bee Gees?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I know Faith No More covers that, and somebody else I think might be before the Bee Gees, though. I can't remember.
Oh no, Bee Gees are 60, late 60s, early 70s. They that song was around. I was listening to that song when I was a kid. That's old school song, man. I think Faith No More covered that like in maybe 91, 92 when they were big, when they came out with that album.
Yeah, there was another artist, a single name artist that they attributed to the song. I don't recall the name.
Oh.
So it may be before the Bee Gees, but it may be after. I don't know.
Was that Doobie?
Doobie.
He must have left. So Ace,
Yeah, baby.
have you scored a heater yet for your executive headquarters?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was thinking of going to the hardware store and getting some terracotta pots, some little terracotta pots, and putting them under a candle, put a candle over them. And that might help warm the place up.
Okay.
Because I've got candles, just don't have the terracotta pots.
Do you do paraffin or soy?
Just paraffin.
I hate to ask a man about his personal business unstrategically.
Yeah.
It's bad form, you know.
Right.
I gotta go, guys. I'll catch you later. Thanks.
Later, JG. Good to see you.
I'm sorry about your strike, buddy.
Oh, thanks. I'll see you then.
Okay. So, Tommy, what have you said to people about the rich man and Lazarus when they insist that hell is eternal conscious punishment and they use the rich man and Lazarus as proof text?
I try not to traffic in childishly hellish knowledge claims. In other words, I'm not sure I recall.
Yeah. Well, do you think, did you hear the reading of this? Do you think you have some tools now to address it?
Potentially.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Nice to see you again.
I'm doing good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, let me make sure. Okay, I had to turn off the YouTube, so now it don't echo anymore.
Perfect.
I wanted to say that's a good explanation you had on the rich man Lazarus. There's so much about that parable. One thing I want to point out that I saw in the video that I want to I actually have a copy on my computer. I want to upload it later on when I get the chance. But if you you said in your explanation that the parable he was talking to the Pharisees, and in the parable the rich man Lazarus, the rich man switches places with the man Lazarus. Well, if you look up the Abraham and if you go back to Genesis, he had a servant named Elizer. And if you look up the meaning of Elizer, it means he who God has helped, which is the same thing that Lazarus means, which means that Lazarus and Elizer are the same name. So, and Elizer was not a descendant of Abraham. So he represents the nations or someone who doesn't inherit the promise of Abraham. And later in the parable, the rich man had 5 brothers. Well, Jacob had 2 wives, Leah and Rachel. And Leah had 6 sons, and Rachel had 6 sons. So Judah, who was Leah's son, had 5 brothers. And the rich man said to Abraham in the parable, "I have 5 brothers. What's going to happen to them?" And then Abraham responds with, "They have the law and the prophets." So the brothers cannot refer to just anybody. It can only refer to descendants of Abraham, and that further proves that that Lazarus is switching places. That the rich man, which is the Pharisees, are switching places with Lazarus, and during the millennial kingdom, the rich man being put out cannot refer to a complete and total permanent separation from a permanent annihilation, because the rest of the Bible doesn't teach permanent annihilation. So it has to be referring to the kingdom. I know what I said is a mouthful, and I can slow down and go back from and repeat some of that. But that's just, I just wanted to add to that, to your point as to what that passage is about.
I'm following you just fine, and but I want you to repeat it anyway because it's a really wonderful viewpoint on the matter.
I'll be glad to. So to review the book of Genesis, Israel had 12 tribes. So you had Abraham, who was the first Hebrew, and then he had a son, Isaac, who had a son, Jacob. Jacob was renamed Israel, and he had 2 wives, and that's a long story how he got 2 wives. It's not important now. And then each of them was Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah each had 6 sons, which each of those 12 boys became the 12 tribes of Israel. But the only one that remained, that continued to remember its identity, is Judah, who are the Jews. So the Pharisees are of the tribe of Judah. So is Jesus, but he's not a Pharisee. So because that means that Judah had 5 brothers by his mother Leah, but he had 11 brothers by his father Jacob. So and also Abraham had servants. One of them was named Elizer, who means whom God has helped. If you look up the name Lazarus, it means whom God has helped. So Lazarus is a Greek pronunciation of the Hebrew word Elizer, the name Elizer. Sometimes when people change names, like that, when they go from language to language, their entire name changes, and sometimes it doesn't. And Elizer is a case where the name totally changes. And if you think about it, Elizer and Lazarus do sound kind of alike, kind of like Jesus and Jesus sound similar. And so in the rich man Lazarus, you have the rich man who's living rich, and then you had purple robes, I think, which is a priesthood sign. So that's more proof of it's talking about the Pharisees specifically. And then you had Lazarus. Well, they both die and they wake up, and Lazarus is with Abraham, who in the book of Genesis did not inherit the promises of Israel. And you had the rich man, which is on the other side, separated from Abraham, and later, which would have been very offensive to the Pharisees listening to that, because they believed that they were to be inheriting the kingdom.
Right.
And then the rich man said to Abraham, in this, it's a metaphorical conversation because it's a parable. There's not a real conversation between the rich man and Abraham, but the rich man, this conversation became worried about his 5 brothers.
How charming that he was worried, right?
Right, because he didn't want his 5 brothers to lose. And when most of Christianity...
Well, I just think that's funny that you said it's a metaphorical conversation, because it would be easier to imagine this rich man didn't give a crap about his brothers when he was alive and rich, right?
Right.
So go ahead.
So, yeah, it's interesting that he all of a sudden would care. I didn't even think about that, but that is fascinating. I guess deep down inside, Judah's always cared about the lost tribes of Israel, but just kind of like how sometimes siblings fight, but they still love each other. That means that Judah's always liked the lost tribes of Israel, but not necessarily, they fought with them. And that's kind of, and Martin Zender said the Sumerians had come from the lost tribes. And I haven't studied deep into that, but I'll take his word for it. And we noticed that the Pharisees didn't really like the Sumerians very much. But I think the parable of the rich man Lazarus, as a side note, teaches that Judah's always cared about his lost brothers, even if they fought a lot. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that's right. And I wanted to point out, because when most of Christianity teaches this parable, they'll refer to the 5 brothers as the family of the rich man and completely discount the fact that it's 5 brothers. They just figure it's family. Don't even think about, well, why 5 brothers? Why not brothers, sisters, mother, father?
Right. Yeah.
And another thing, if Elizer was Abraham's servant, and Abraham switching place with Elizer, could Jesus have been hinting that there was a celestial gospel, but he just didn't really explain it? Kind of like in John chapter 3 when he's talking to Nicodemus, he says, you can't even understand the terrestrial. How could you understand the celestial? I think that's
Right.
John 3:13.
Yeah.
So I think the rich man and Lazarus is another parable where Jesus kind of hints at the fact that there's something for the nations, but he just can't reveal it. Also, he did a miracle for someone of the nations when it wasn't his time. That happened, I think, later in the book of Matthew. So I think Jesus knew that he would reveal another gospel, but he just couldn't go into details while he was on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's come up. Well, did Jesus know that there would be a celestial gospel? Well, did the Father tell him about it? I guess he did. So anyway, I know I said a lot, and I just wanted to add to that because I thought that was really fascinating, and I thought it further back up everything that you had said, and as I said, this would have been very insulting to the Pharisees listening to that parable, because that would, because they would not have wanted to hear that. So I guess that's probably why they crucified him, right?
Yep, because their income stream was, and their power and pride were about to be smacked down.
Right. That's pretty much all I had to say on that. I don't know how much more to add to that. If anyone, had any questions or any comment, I can't see the comments on YouTube, but I'd be happy to try to explain anything else on that. Because I also want to address what the other guy was saying about Pantheon and all that stuff. He got on, a good question, but it's a little different topic. But I'm glad he asked it. From what I was told, and I don't, and AC, you've been doing this longer than me, so if I misunderstood, correct me. But I've been told that Elohim is like a singular plural noun, like team is as a team is one thing, but it has multiple people. And so in the book of Genesis, when you have Elohim saying, "Let us make man in our image," then it's a team of it's a team word that would have been in Hebrew, but the Bible says there's only one God, so that hints at the fact that God has servants, or God has it kind of hints at the coming Messiah right there in Genesis. And since Jesus is the Son of God, he's in the God family. That's why Jesus took on the titles of God while not being God, by saying that before Moses, I am, and things like that. And so there's one God, but he has a son, and that's why there's a singular plural word in Genesis. And I wonder if that would have perplexed the Hebrews why a singular plural word was used for God, Elohim, because they didn't know about the Messiah, or they knew there would be a Messiah, but
if they were to use the word Elohim, they would have to know that the original root word of the word is El, which is God of all gods, the one God. Elohim's a plural of gods from that one God. So they would have to know what El is to come up with Elohim.
You're right. They would have. They just wrote down what they were saying, and then the other passages say there's one God. So that's where, and about Pantheon coming from that's what the Trinity teaches, is that there are 3 gods, and which we don't, but then Trinity doesn't make sense. Teaches there's 3 gods and there's one God. It just doesn't add up.
Well, I don't think the Trinity is actually mentioned in the Bible as a Trinity. That's just something that was made from the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit reference.
Which passage are you referring to?
Oh, I'm not good with numbers and placements. I just read it a couple of times. A couple places here and there.
I apologize.
Are you a godologist? Plastic.
Me?
Are you a certified godologist? Just asking.
Not certified.
Oh, okay.
Like maybe like a semi-delusional hobby of mine, maybe.
A hobbyist? Oh, of
Mhm.
course.
Yep.
Yes. Cool. Well, competence is as competence does. You know, I was just saying so.
You gotta start. You gotta crawl before you walk, I guess. So.
You referred to a passage in Hebrews. It was Hebrews 11, I think it is.
Yeah.
All right, I'll look it up without losing a tab. Let's see, concordant.org,
Yeah.
and I will go and look that up.
Hebrews 11, verse 3.
Hebrews 11, verse 3. I'm getting to it. And because this is good for me, because I'm always, want to learn things. I have an open mind to whatever Scripture says. By faith, we are apprehending the eons to adjust to a declaration of God, so that what is being observed has not come out of what is appearing.
Cool,
Okay.
huh?
Yeah, I'll have to digest that. So now faith is the assumption of what is being expected, a conviction concerning matters which are not being observed. For this, the elders were testified to. By faith, we are apprehending the eons to adjust to a declaration of God, so that what is being observed has not come out of what is appearing. Okay, so what is appearing is Jesus, and what is observed, it could be just not. I always took that to me not just coming out of God and Jesus, but coming out of the whole spiritual realm itself. That God created the celestial realm, and then from the celestial realm created the terrestrial.
Well,
That's what I've
you might
always.
be right, but I'm going to narrow it down to say that since the book of Hebrews is written to the Jews, I get the feeling that the whole dang thing was written to them because they were upset that the Messiah has not returned.
That's
And
right.
so,
Okay.
what we have here is an explanation as to why the Messiah has not returned. It's because the eons have been adjusted by a declaration of God. The timeline has been adjusted. So Israel has been put on the back burner. And Israel is believing Israel is upset or worried. And they don't understand that they've been put on the back burner until the complement of the nations may be entering. So here's their reassurance. By faith, we are apprehending the eons to adjust. So that what we were hoping to see has not happened yet. We were hoping to see the Messiah and Israel as the dominant leader, dominant nation on the earth for a 1,000-year reign of Christ. So that what is being observed has not come out of what is appearing. Maybe it'd be better if there was a comma right there after the word come. So that what is being observed has not come out of what is appearing.
That makes total sense. That echoes what Paul said in Romans.
Yes.
It's almost identical to what Paul said in Romans. That leads people to wonder if Paul wrote Hebrews but didn't put his name on it, because if he had, that would make it a Gospel of the Nations letter. So to prevent that, he didn't put his name on it.
Probably
That's
another
it.
reason he probably didn't put his name on it is because the Jews would have been pissed to know that this letter came from Paul.
Right.
Because they were already pissed at him.
Yes, they were.
I can empathize. Who needs any more truth than they already have trouble keeping from unraveling? Gee whiz.
So, Tommy, true or false? The eons have been adjusted by a declaration of God.
True.
You're going to get in trouble with Bill.
What, just for agreeing with something I don't understand? Oh, okay.
All right. Now, it's we've been at it 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's 13 minutes past the hour. Boys and girls, we have a treat for you. The very thing you've been waiting for.
Yeah.
I know you've been waiting for it. It is Wes Camp's video on the rich man and Lazarus.
Thank you.
All right, so don't hit. Make sure the sound is right, Gabe,
Mhm.
and also be at the ready to hit pause when anybody in the panel here wants to stop it and say, "What the hell?"
Do a little test here.
Yeah, do a little test. No sound. So take it out and bring it back in, but hit the audio button before you bring it back in.
Gotcha. So stop sharing.
So we got so far 3 commentaries on the rich man and Lazarus. One by Chris, one by me, and the next one by Brother Wes Camp. And if you remember, boys and girls, from your studies in the scriptures, in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul says how to have a good meeting. When you have the church get together, he says, let each of you speak by 2 or by 3. So Chris and me, and then Wes Camp, and then you might want to include Plastic Jesus as our foil. Thank you, Plastic.
No problem.
Do another test here.
Okay.
Simply because she is rich
Got it.
and
Got
enjoy.
it. All right, back it up and let's see what he's got to say.
Here we go now.
Oh, wait a minute, before you do. Get your paper and pencil out, boys and girls, if you're old school, and take notes on Wes's prattling, because it's really good. He brings up a lot of scriptures that I haven't seen elsewhere. And this guy is just, we'll call him Brother Amazing, okay? Most people call him Wes. His channel name is called The Biggest Jesus. How's that for a bold channel name? The Biggest Jesus. All right, ready, set, go.
Will Kim Kardashian burn in hell forever simply because she is rich and enjoys good things in life?
Help me, Jesus! Help me, Jesus!
Many teach that the story of the rich man and Lazarus in Luke 16 is a literal and actual account of 3 men: the rich man, the poor man Lazarus, and Abraham. They say that this story is telling us what they're actually doing while dead in Hades, or the unseen. They call this the intermediate state, where the dead are actually alive, but they will somehow
Sorry, thought I heard a pause.
only be classified as being alive after their resurrection. So what they're actually claiming this story teaches is that these 3 are the living dead, not the dead, and that goes for all the dead. According to Orthodox Christianity, all of the dead are actually alive somewhere. In reality, their teaching makes resurrection pointless and redundant. The people are already alive. What's the point of resurrection? In God's plan, resurrection of the dead is vital. That is the means he uses to bring them out of death and back into life. In addition, they say that the story of the rich man and Lazarus proves that people will suffer torment in hell forever and ever. Myself and many others teach that this story from Jesus is a parable and not an actual account of literal events. By showing that this story from Jesus is a parable, my goal is to debunk 2 major false teachings that come from seeing this as a literal story of what happens in the realm of the dead. By seeing this as a parable, we see that the dead are actually dead and not alive somewhere else in God's universe. And secondly, by seeing this as a parable, we will realize that none of the dead are being tormented in flames in death. Before we look at this story that Jesus told, let's look at the crowd that actually heard this story, many of whom he was addressing directly. The Pharisees. We can see who the crowd was that heard the 5 parables from Jesus in Luke 15 through 16. from Luke 15, 1 through 2, and Luke 16, 1. Now all the tribute collectors and sinners were coming near him to be hearing him. And both the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying that this man sinners is receiving and is eating with them. And in chapter 16, verse 1, now he said to his disciples also. So this was a full crowd, the tribute collectors, sinners, Pharisees and scribes, and the disciples of Christ, all heard these parables from his lips. In Luke 16, 19 through 31, we read the parable of the rich man and Lazarus from the Concordant Literal New Testament. Now a certain man was rich, and he dressed in purple and cambric, daily making merry splendidly. Now there was a certain poor man named Lazarus, who had been cast at his portal, having ulcers, and yearning to be satisfied from the scraps which are falling from the rich man's table. But the curs also coming licked his ulcers. Now the poor man came to die, and he is carried away by the messengers into Abraham's bosom. Now the rich man also died, and was entombed. And in the unseen lifting up his eyes, existing in torments, he is seeing Abraham from afar, and Lazarus in his bosom. Verse 24, and he shouting said, Father Abraham, be merciful to me, and send Lazarus, that he should be dipping the tip of his finger in water and cooling my tongue, for I am pained in this flame. Now Abraham said, Child, be reminded that you got your good things in your life, and Lazarus likewise evil things. Yet now here he is being consoled, yet you are in pain. And in all this, between us and you, a great chasm has been established, so that those wanting to cross hence to you may not be able, nor yet those thence may be ferrying to us. Yet he said, I am asking you then, Father, that you should be sending him into my father's house. For I have 5 brothers, so that he may be certifying to them, lest they also may be coming into this place of torment. Verse 29, yet Abraham is saying to him, they have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. Yet he said, No, Father Abraham, but if someone should be going to them from the dead, they will be repenting. Yet he said to him, If Moses and the prophets they are not hearing, either will they be persuaded if someone should be rising from among the dead. There are some serious problems for those who take this account literally. The first and probably the biggest problem is the reason that Lazarus is in Abraham's bosom and the reason that the rich man is being tormented in flame. We see the reasons why the rich man is where he is and Lazarus is where he is. According to the parable, in verse 19, it mentions a certain man was rich. And in verse 20, it says a certain poor man. Now, verse 25, Abraham lays out the reason why they are in the positions they're in. Now Abraham said, Child, be reminded that you got your good things in your life, and Lazarus likewise evil things. Yet now here he is being consoled, yet you are in pain. These are the only reasons given in the parable for why these two are in the position they are. One was rich and got good things. One was poor and received evil things in this life.
Pause, please. Thank you. I was just making sure you're on your toes. Carry on.
Okay.
The end is pain for the rich man, consolation for the poor man. If you take this story literally, are you willing to say that one's final position is based on their bank account and how much good or evil they received in this life, and not the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ? Are you really willing to go that far? If so, in the comments below, please provide me with scripture that shows that it's your bank account and your reception of good or evil in this life that determines your final position with God. Some have said this is a literal account because Jesus does not call it a parable. It is the 5th parable in a series of 5 parables in Luke 15 through 16. Let's take a look at those 5 parables right now. Here's a list of the 5 parables that Jesus told in Luke 15 through 16. First, we have the parable of the one lost sheep, which he actually calls a parable. Second, we have the parable of the one lost coin, which is not called a parable. Third, we have a parable of the prodigal son, which is not called a parable. Fourth, we have the parable of the unjust steward, which is not called a parable. And fifth, we have the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, which also is not called a parable. So the fact that the rich man and Lazarus is not called a parable does not mean that it is not a parable. These parables were intended by Jesus to reveal God's love and beneficial work for all sinners, and to accuse those who despise God's love and beneficial work for all sinners. Another strong piece of evidence that shows that this story is a parable is found 4 chapters later in Luke 20, where Jesus tells us very clearly that Abraham is dead. Dead. So in Luke 16, we have Abraham chumming it up with Lazarus the poor man, talking
Double
to
dead.
the rich man who is tormented in flame. And in chapter 20, we have him dead. So is Abraham dead, or is he alive? If he is in fact dead, which Jesus said he was, this is very strong evidence that we are looking at a parable in the rich man and Lazarus, which leads us to the conclusion that the dead are dead and no one is being tormented in flame in death. Let's take a look at that passage right now. In Luke 20, 37 through 38, we read the words of Christ. Now that the dead are rousing, even Moses divulges at the thorn bush, as he is terming the Lord, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now God is he not of the dead, but of the living, for all to him are living. Jesus is being questioned by the Sadducees, who said there is no resurrection. They came up with an elaborate question for him regarding future marriage after the resurrection, and Jesus set them straight, showing them from the Old Testament scriptures that there is indeed a resurrection, and it is based on the words of Moses, whom the Sadducees revered. We see at the beginning of verse 37 the subject of these two verses. Jesus tells us the dead are rousing. And who does he use as examples of the dead? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, from the lips of Moses. And he reinforces the fact that they are dead at the beginning of verse 38. Now God is he not of the dead, but of the living. So how is he the God of the living, but not the God of the dead? To understand this, we must understand the word God comes from the Greek theos. And the definition of theos is placer, which corresponds to the Hebrew el, which means subjector. God is an active God. He places people. But this passage tells us that God is he not of the dead, but of the living. He is not placing the dead. He is placing the living. He is not moving the dead around. He is not animating them to do things in life. They are dead. The chessboard provides us with a good illustration of God placing the living, not the dead. While Abraham is on the board representing where the living are, God moves him to where he wants him. God places Abraham according to God's will. As the Apostle Paul said in Acts 17:28, in God we are living and moving and are. Thus, he is the God or placer of the living, and the living only. But just as in chess, when someone is removed from the board or the living and they are dead, God is no longer their God. He is no longer placing them until they are returned to the board through resurrection. But Moses could say of these dead men that God is their God. Now, how can he say this? Well, it's because of the future resurrection that is coming. The future resurrection that Jesus threw in the face of the Sadducees, who said there is no resurrection. Here is why God can be called the God of someone who is dead, while at the same time not being the God of the dead. It's because God is already in the future after the dead have been resurrected to life. This is why Jesus said, for all to him are living. It's in the future for us, but not for God. He is already there in the future, as we can see from the following verses. We must understand that God is not limited by time as we are. Isaiah 57:15. For thus says the one high and lifted up, who tabernacles the future, and holy is his name. God is already at the time and beyond when Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will be resurrected. Thus he can be called the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, even while they are literally dead. It's because of their future resurrection, and he is already there. He tabernacles the future. And we see in Romans 4:17 that he is the God who is vivifying the dead and calling what is not as if it were. From our perspective right now, Abraham is dead, and God is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. But he can call it as though it is a reality because to him it is, just as it says at the end of Luke 20:38, for all to him are living. To us, all are not living. He's already in the future. He's already there when all are resurrected. He's already there when he will be all in all. 1 Corinthians 15:28. From this evidence, we see that Abraham is very dead, and the story of the rich man and Lazarus is indeed a parable, not an actual account of literal events. Abraham was not chumming it up with Lazarus while scolding the rich man who was being tormented in flame, only because he had a hefty amount of shekels in his bank account and was having a good time with the ladies. And no, Abraham didn't die somewhere between Luke chapter 16 and Luke chapter 20. Ever since he died the first time, he's been dead. He was dead through the entirety of Jesus' ministry, and he remains dead today. So because he is dead, God is currently, at this moment, not his God. He is not his placer. On the heels of this truth from Luke 20, some have asked me this very good question. So this says God is not the God of the dead, but in Romans 14, it says that Jesus is the Lord of the dead and the living. What about that? Huh? I say, great question. Let's have a look and see what that verse says. Romans 14:9 says, For this Christ died and lives, that he should be Lord of the dead as well as of the living. First, notice the two distinct groups, the dead and the living. If all are currently alive in some shape or form, then all would be the living, and there would be no dead. There will be a time when all are living, as we saw in Luke 20, but that is in the future, when death is abolished and only life remains. 1 Corinthians 15:26. Christ, through his obedience to his Father, bought all things and all people, whether they were dead or alive at the time that he bought them. Therefore, he is the Lord of all of the dead and all of the living. The word Lord comes from the Greek kurios, and it means master, one who has authority over others, a person exercising absolute ownership rights. And we see from the scriptures how Christ, the Lord, wields his absolute authority even over the dead. In John 5:25 and 28 through 29, we see the authority of Jesus as Lord of the dead as well as the living. Verily, verily, I am saying to you that coming is an hour, and now is, when the dead shall be hearing the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear shall be living. Marvel not at this, for coming is the hour in which all who are in the tombs shall hear his voice, and those who do good shall go out into a resurrection of life, yet those who commit bad things into a resurrection of judging. We see clearly Christ the Lord authority over the dead. Whether Abraham is dead or alive, Christ Jesus is his master. But God is only his God or placer while Abraham is alive, not while he is dead. If we quickly go back to Luke 20:37 through 38, we can see that Lord and God, kurios and theos, are used together in this passage. Now that the dead are rousing, even Moses divulges at the thorn bush, as he is terming the master, the placer of Abraham, and the placer of Isaac, and the placer of Jacob. Now placer is he not of the dead, but of the living, for all to him are living. So we see how God in this passage can be both Lord, Master, while not being God, placer of the dead. Even Christ, while he was dead, was not being placed by his Father. Now let's take a quick look at some verses throughout the scriptures that reinforce the big truth of God, that the dead are really the dead, not the living dead, and that God is not placing them here or there or anywhere. Remember that the story of the rich man and Lazarus takes place in the unseen. Ecclesiastes 9:5, but the dead know nothing whatsoever. Ecclesiastes 9:10, for there is no doing or devising or knowledge or wisdom in the unseen, aka Sheol or Hades, where you are going. Psalm 6:5, for in death there is no remembrance of you, in the unseen, Sheol or Hades, who shall acclaim you? Psalm 115:17 through 18. The dead cannot praise Yah, nor all those descending into stillness. But we, the living, we shall bless Yah, henceforth and unto the eon. praise Yah. In Revelation 25, the rest of the dead do not live until the 1,000 years should be finished. The key phrase in that verse is the dead do not live. I have a request for those in Orthodox Christianity that have used the parable of the rich man and Lazarus to threaten people with everlasting or eternal torment in flame. Stop doing this. You are misusing this passage. This passage is not meant to teach eternal suffering for anyone, whether they are currently dead or whether they will be resurrected in the future and face judgment from God. Please, Orthodox Christianity, stop misusing God's scriptures. Based on all the information we've looked at here, the next thing on the itinerary for the dead, all of the dead, is their resurrection when they hear the voice of Christ call them out of the dead. Some will come out into a resurrection of life. Some will come out into a resurrection of judging. But keep in mind this key fact. The judge of all is also the Savior of all. I have a question for you. Would you be opposed to watching this next video?
Man, wasn't that something?
It's good.
Woo, doggy.
God bless the biggest Jesus. What do you think, Chris?
That was amazing.
What do you think, punk in Christ? So I thought. How about you, Plastic?
I was well amused. I was well amused.
Well, the story itself, and I tend to play stories and timelines, you know. And during that time of that story, we're looking at an emperor. I can't remember his name. I want to say it's not Demetrius, it's something, but he was one of the worst emperors during that rule of when that story was written, which is a generation after Jesus, pretty much, which is what I forgot, 70 to 110 AD. So this emperor, we know that Jesus, Paul, and John, and all the others were already running their ministries, you know, to get their name set. And during this time, this emperor was one of the cruelest emperors that they ever experienced. He built a new temple for Jupiter. He pretty much squandered the money and kept it for himself. A lot of division, you know, big division from the poor and the rich. And I think it was just the right time for this type of story to come out to kind of keep the people at ease, you know, to let them understand that doesn't get you there in a way. So I put it into a placeholder of time itself to see where it kind of falls in as a story would be written for its audience.
In other words, I have no fucking idea what you were just talking about. How about you, Gabe? What did you think of it?
History.
I need to listen to it again, but it was good. Yeah. My brain doesn't really come online until later in the afternoon.
And what he was saying, I know Jesus talked a lot about the need to help the poor during his ministry, and so he was trying to. I think what name do you go by? Plastic Jesus was saying is that it kind. That's just something I've thought about because Jesus talked about the need to help the poor and people in poverty really had a hard life then. And so he was trying to bring comfort that the riches don't get you goodness in this riches may get you goodness in this life, but not the next.
Right. That's exactly what I was saying. They're seeing the emperor up there with his riches and spending money just frivolously on anything he wants to do. Then you have to explain to the people, you know, that it's more, there's a lot into it, but yeah, it's pretty much that. Yeah.
I think that's good commentary on it. I don't think that the parable means to say that every single rich person loses out, but it certainly is designed to bring comfort to the poor and warn the rich of not helping, of what can happen to them if they don't care about the poor. I think
Okay.
that's part of what the rich man Lazarus might also mean. I think that's a loaded parable with so much meaning.
Well,
There's so
yeah,
much
it,
stuff
it
that's
works on
short.
both sides. It
I'm
works
going
on
to
both
go
sides. It
beyond
comforts
what
the
you guys
poor and
say.
it teaches the rich, to not be such dicks.
I'm going to go beyond what you guys say and focus on the target audience that he was speaking to primarily was Pharisees and scribes. And they were rich in knowledge of the law and the oracles and the promise and the covenants. They were rich and they weren't sharing the wealth. And you can't look at the rich man and Lazarus without also looking at the other four parts of this parable, including the section which is talking about the shrewd steward, because this shrewd steward, he knew he was going to get fired. And so he ran around real quickly and cut his master's debts in half so that he would have a place among them when he got fired. And so this whole thing was directed at the Pharisees. It's not talking about the rich or the poor. It goes far beyond that. This is the richness that the Pharisees had in their religious status, their understanding of what God was doing and the upcoming kingdom. And they thought they were going to have a place. And Jesus was basically telling them they're going to get fired. And knowing that you're going to get fired, you better go start being kind to the scum of the earth that don't know about the upcoming messianic kingdom, and make sure that they are enjoying and believing God. That's the riches they had. That's the riches that were under consideration, because he spoke this, to 5 different groups of people, primarily the Pharisees and the scribes. And this had nothing to do with, the rich going to hell and the poor going to Abraham's bosom. It's impossible to assign to every aspect of this story a true meaning. The true meaning is the feeling he was giving to the Pharisees about their impending pink slip. They were going to be fired.
Fire, lake of fire.
No, they were going to be fired. They would not have a part in the kingdom like they thought they were going to have a part in the kingdom.
But there was a reason why they were talking to the Pharisees and the scribes, because the Pharisees were the ones who were waiting for the true Messiah to come back. So this gives an explanation on how a true Messiah would tell a story that a Messiah would tell. So it would give a little validity to Jesus himself. And also, you always tell everything to the scribes, because those are the fuckers who are going to write everything down and tell everybody else about it. That's how it works. You want to spread the word. You don't tell dumb people on the street. They're not going to do anything with it. You got to tell the reporters and the know-it-alls. That's how information spreads. I worked in advertisement for many years. I think you did too, Ace. You should know better.
I worked in advertising as well.
I thought you worked in marketing.
What's the difference?
I was a graphic artist. Didn't mean to shit in your Cheerios.
No, you did great, I thought.
Thank you, sir.
I think what Ace was saying that is correct. That is the definite meaning of that. Anything about rich giving the poor is kind of reading into it a little bit, even if that could be gathered from the story. It's not the main thing Jesus was talking about. It's because it wasn't the original point of the parable, but I guess it could have other applications, but that's not the point he was getting at initially. I hope I said that right.
Okay. So Gabe, did you hear the reading of this?
No, I'd like to hear it. I missed it.
All right, here we go. Good morning, dear one. The serious Bible student might be interested in the facts revealed concerning the story of Jesus, the story Jesus told of the rich man and Lazarus. Most folks, i.e. Christians, are not serious Bible students. They go to church, they let the pastor read one verse, and they listen to him prattle for 1 hour, and then think they know what the Bible teaches. I think we can say that on the whole, let me get rid of that typo there. I think we can say that on the whole, Christianity uses the story of the rich man and Lazarus to scare the crap out of people and continually promote that false teaching of endless conscious torment in hell. Here are some facts regarding the topic at hand. The rich man and Lazarus is not just a parable, but it's one part of a 5-part parable. How do we know? Because Luke 15:3 says, Jesus opened his mouth and spake unto them this parable. Get it? This parable. Well, if we keep on reading, this parable goes on and on about the lost coin, the lost sheep, the prodigal son, the shrewd steward, and finally the rich man and Lazarus. Please note, this parable goes on and on for 2 chapters. Luke 15 and 16 is all one long parable. Now you might ask, to whom was Jesus speaking? Well, we find the answer in Luke 15, 1 and 2, and 16:3. He was speaking to 5 groups of people: tax collectors, sinners, Pharisees, scribes, and his own disciples. What was the occasion of this whole parable? Well, the Pharisees and scribes were kind of pissed that Jesus was enjoying the company of sinners. Luke 5:15-2. You see, the scribes and Pharisees were big muckety-mucks of their day, and if they were right in their religious understanding of things, they were going to have a special place in the kingdom of the Messiah when the Messiah shows up. Little did they know, their Messiah was standing right in front of their eyes, not what they expected at all. The scribes and Pharisees were not too friendly with regular old sinners, something to do with self-righteous and pride-filled power, if you know what I mean. So they were investing in the future by making sure they had a seat at the table and no one else did when the kingdom era showed up. You get me? They didn't expect this fellow Jesus to be the Messiah. He was nothing special. To them, he was a distraction, to say the least. They wanted to be the center of attention, and Jesus was getting too much attention. Keep in mind, they knew the kingdom was coming, and Jesus knew the kingdom was coming, and they thought they'd have a lofty spot in the kingdom, but Jesus used this 5-part parable to show them their days as muckety-mucks were numbered. Keep in mind, after Jesus' resurrection, the disciples asked Jesus, "Will you now restore the kingdom to Israel?" You see, Israel getting the promised kingdom is a thing, but the timing of the matter is sketchy. Even Jesus doesn't know the time it's going to happen, and said as much to the disciples when they asked him that question. Jesus said, "It's not for you to know the times, not even I know. Only the Father knows the times." Or more specifically, Acts 1:7, he said unto them, "Not yours is it to know times or eras which the Father placed in his own jurisdiction." By all appearances, Jesus was supposed to be the king of the kingdom, and he was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And they were supposed to accept him as Messiah and king, but something went terribly wrong. He ended up on a pole instead, dead. Everything went wrong. Then a cosmic shift in the axis of the universe happened. God raised him from the dead. Now what? The disciples are confused. The Jews are confused. We might even say that Jesus is confused, as he too admits he does not know the times. We don't get a hint of what's going on with Israel and their promised kingdom until Hebrews 11:3. By faith, we are apprehending the eons to adjust to a declaration of God, so that what is being observed has not come out of what is appearing. The book of Hebrews was written to the Jews to explain to them what the hell is going on and why they don't have their promised and expected kingdom yet. Yes, God does have an Aeonian plan and purpose. See Ephesians 3:11. But who knew that the eons would have to be adjusted to a declaration of God? The adjustment of the eons is the thing. See Hebrews 11:3. Jesus came as Israel's promised Messiah, but rejected. So after the resurrection and a little housekeeping with the disciples, Jesus ascends to be seated with the Father and sends the Spirit on the day of Pentecost to see if Israel is game yet to receive their Messiah. And the rejection gets worse. Finally, the rejection or acceptance of Messiah gets to the pins and needles stage when Stephen is recounting the whole story to them in Acts chapters 7 and 8. Just before they killed Stephen, Jesus was standing, not seated, at the right hand of God, ready to return as the Messiah. Well, Jesus got his answer when they pelted Stephen with some pretty seriously big rocks. God had to adjust his Aeonian purpose, and thus we come to Paul and the administration of pure grace. What an adjustment. Thanks be to God that he hardened Israel's knuckle-headed heart. Thank God that something new, something not seen before or known among the prophets of old has happened. Grace. See Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. The eons have been adjusted. The ecclesia, which is his body, was created and introduced, and Paul was the tool to bring us the news. So Jesus' 5-part parable, spoken primarily to the Pharisees and scribes, goes like this. Part 1, the lost sheep. Part 2, the lost coin. Part 3, the prodigal son. Part 4, the shrewd steward. Part 5, finally, the rich man and Lazarus. So part 1 is, I will not lose one sheep. Part 2, I will not lose one coin. Part 3, even the worst prodigal will be so welcomed when they come home. Part 4, if you were smart, you'd prepare to lose your high and mighty position as chiefs and scribes as you're about to be fired. Part 5, you think you're rich in the knowledge of the law and the prophets, but you're about to learn a lesson you'll never forget. These lost sheep, lost coins, and prodigal sons are about to see some blessings you rich dudes, rich in self-righteousness, know nothing about. Not only is the kingdom coming and you're to be left out, but the eons are to be adjusted, and the scum of the earth, those heathen Gentiles, are going to be brought in just to piss you off. Romans 9, 10, and 11. You Pharisees like apples? How do you like them apples? So, on the whole, I'd say it's plumb wrong for the Pharisees of our day, the evangelical, knuckle-headed, religious people, to use the rich man and Lazarus story to insist that they are going to heaven and we scum of the earth are going to hell. Regarding the adjusting of the eons, look at this. Matthew through Acts, then Paul's letters, then Hebrews through Revelation. Paul's letters are so out of place. From Matthew through Revelation, we have a message to, for, and about, and concerning Israel. Paul's evangel of our salvation is the grand adjustment of the eons. God put Israel on pause, time out. God is now being gracious with all nations and is offering no special privilege to Israel at the moment, and will not until Messiah returns and the ecclesia, which is his body, is removed. Oh my. There you go, Gabe. What do you got?
Cool. It almost makes me feel bad for the Pharisees. They were trying their best and they got caught up in their own ways and eventually lost touch. And Jesus had to come down and let them know what was going on. But I mean, they're only playing their role, right? And I hadn't really thought of it as an adjustment before. That kind of seems non-deterministic to me. But I'm going to think about that.
Non-deterministic.
I got think.
Well, I believe that God knew the adjustment was coming and planned for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So is this Hebrews 11:3 new to you?
I don't remember what it said. I think it was. Did you just go? Okay.
There it is. Go ahead and read it.
By faith, we are apprehending the eons to adjust to a declaration of God, so that what is being observed has not come out of what is appearing. Yeah, so the adjustment is from our perspective, right?
Yes.
Our understanding of what is to come. And then what the verse that Mr. Fallenkamp mentioned, God being, what was he, furnishing the future? Was it? What was it?
Oh yeah, he tabernacles in the future.
Tabernacles in the future.
Wow, that's a hell of a thought, huh?
And then I hadn't thought about Jesus standing before either. So how could you go more into that? What you were thinking about there?
Well, normally we think of Jesus being seated at the right hand of the Father. But when Stephen preached his long-winded message to Israel and told them, they were being snots, like just killing the prophets and the Messiah, Stephen looks up and sees Jesus standing at the right hand of the Father. And I'm guessing that it was like, hey, I'm ready. Jesus says, hey, I'm ready. I can come down and be your Messiah now. You ready? You want to receive me? And then they kill Stephen. So he had to sit back down.
Interesting.
So he was ready to come back on stage. But no, he didn't understand the timing of the Father. Even in the heavens, he doesn't understand the timing of the Father. He stands up and he's ready to go back down there as the Messiah. That's how I viewed it these years.
Yeah, that's kind of how it sounds.
Yeah. What do you got, Chris?
That's all really good. I can't really add anything to that. I want to say that I'm really glad you brought up the parable. I think it's called the parable of the shrewd master that went before the judge, the fourth one in the 5 list, because that one's not really talked about very much. So I'm glad you explained that. We don't hear as much about that parable, and everything y'all are talking about is just so good. I can't add anything to that, but I do want to ask. I know earlier I was saying that Jesus knew there was a celestial gospel, but wasn't ready to reveal it. He must have not have known when or if, because if Jesus doesn't know the timing, then he wouldn't have known how that or when the right time for that gospel to be dispensed, or if it would be even before the kingdom. Jesus may have thought a celestial revelations may not have even come till after his return. He for all because he was standing when Stephen was being stoned, and Jesus knew that he would eventually be sharing the gospel of the celestials. That means he didn't know he would be revealing it to Paul until the Father sent him to do it around that time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that I think that's just something I thought about when y'all were talking. But outside of that, I think y'all and everyone nailed it. This has been just a really, really good gathering. It's so good when we all get together in fellowship and teach. I had no idea I was going to be on the show today. I went to bed earlier than I normally go because I work all night, and I just got so tired last night, and I thought, why am I going to bed at 8 o'clock at night? That's just really strange, and now I know the reason. It's because
That's cool.
It's just so good. It's so glad to gather. And I definitely, when the show is finished, I'm going to upload it to Facebook. I want to share this with anyone who's willing to watch, because people really need to learn that Jesus is the Savior of all mankind, and this parable of rich man Lazarus have been misused. And I want to make sure that people know this has been good. I know I'm going on and on. I just don't know what you else to think.
I really enjoyed hearing what you said about Elizer and Abraham. I need to research that more based on what you said, Chris.
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
That was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it's like if I do it, I just did a Google search, the meaning of Elizer and the meaning of Lazarus, and it comes right up on a search. So, by all means, do that. I'm really glad I was able that God was able to use me to help, because
Awesome.
in any way. And so I guess it's everything for me. I'm gonna have to be going soon. As much as I'd love to stay on more, but
Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on.
oh, you're welcome, and I look forward to coming on whenever I get to get back on the show.
You're a blessed dude.
Nice to meet you, Chris. Yep. Have a good day.
Nice to meet you too.
Hey, guess what?
What?
The eons have been adjusted by a declaration of God.
That's pretty cool.
It is cool. And you know what's really cool is that you wouldn't even know it from the popular Bible translations and all those knuckleheads who say aeon can be eternal. I mean, there's so much you miss by not having a consistently translated Bible.
Mm-hmm.
If you leave it up to the priestcraft, God, they are going to confuse you about so many things.
Yeah.
That are understandable, and the concept of eternality is not understandable.
Right. Yeah, I liked in Wes's video how he made clear how obvious it is that they are parables, even though it's only the first one that's mentioned as being a parable. It's obviously a series of parables, because that's what you hear when people bring this up. Well, it doesn't specifically say that this is a parable.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't there another section where it says he didn't speak without using a parable?
Yeah, and it said he didn't speak to, the public without using parables, right?
Okay, right. This is unrelated to anything, but except for I like in 15:2, it says when he starts talking to the Pharisees, it says, "Now all the tribute collectors and sinners were coming near him to be hearing him, and both the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled," saying that this man sinners is receiving and is eating with them. I just like that it says that they grumbled. They were like, "Ah."
Yeah.
So they weren't happy even before the parables started. They were already grumbling.
Right. And the Christians have that same attitude to this day.
Mm-hmm.
They love their clique, and any outsider that comes dressed in rags, they grumble.
Mm-hmm.
They love their lofty place in society.
I wish I had more to add, but I'm more of a night person. I can't really, don't have a
I'm
lot
so
going
glad you
on
came in
mentally.
to help. I'm so glad you came in to help, because this was a knockout show, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and listen to the parts that I missed earlier on. See what. I guess you were writing for a while, right? And then.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for having me. I'll talk to you later, and grace and peace to all you brothers and sisters out there. Have a good day.
Amen. And boys and girls, give me a thumbs up if you can spare it. If you can do it without blistering your little finger. And leave comments after the show is over. And share it. This one is worth sharing. And thank you for joining me. And let's find our beloved little exit tune. There we go.